Salute and welcome. So in this video, I wanted to give my take and share some of the research that I've done when it comes to Sony increasing the price of their consoles. This has come to be quite the surprise to many. It's not a surprise to me one bit. And in this video, if you give me some of your time, and you'll understand why. Because I have seen other content creators actually say this has to do with Sony losing money on live services, which is categorically incorrect. And for those of you that might remember, Microsoft ended up raising the prices of their consoles as well a couple of months back. So I wanted to understand if the reasoning behind Microsoft's price increases, which set the gaming industry like on fire, because every time Microsoft does something, it's like worldwide news. It is very, very similar in terms of the reasoning. So let me just kind of say right off the bat, whenever you are making consoles, just like when you're building your own PC, you have to go out and buy certain parts. You, the player or the consumer, are not making RAM. You're buying it from somebody else. So let's just make it very easy. If you are building a particular something and you need a component that costs you $20, okay, so you pay your $20 to get this component. Now you might be able to shave off maybe $2 or $3 because maybe you might have good connections with that person. That's fine. However way that works. Now, what's going on in the console space now is that same component is now no longer costing $20. Now it's costing $100. So you can no longer sell your product for the same price you've been selling it if you intend on making any sort of profit. So now you are forced to raise your price. And what ends up happening is that the price is always going to trickle down, or the cost is going to trickle down to the consumer. So I wanted to share this right now. Let's get into some of the research I've been doing. So I wanted to ask general questions here, and I post here, the Microsoft console price increase was due to storage prices. Please elaborate, because there have been people that have said that as well. So I've been getting this. So this is the Microsoft pricing that you see here that happened in 2025, right? So you see a $50 increase, $20 increase here, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's scroll on down here. Still scrolling. All right, so this is explaining the price increase of Microsoft. Okay, now when we go further down, compare the situation with Microsoft to Sony's recent console price increase. Both Microsoft and Sony have raised console prices amid persistent macroeconomic pressures, including inflation, import tariffs, and ongoing supply chain disruptions. While both companies cite external economic factors, the magnitude, structure, and justification of the price increases differ by platform, model, and market segment. So here you have a comparison right here, a very good comparison of the Series S, $20 increase, PS5, $50, and so this is what they're showing right here, okay? Now this is the major one, and I believe that the reason why they're going with this significant price increase of the PS5 Pro is for a few reasons. I think that Sony has altered, now this is just me spitballing, but I think Sony has decided to, since the PS6 is on its way, but there's some time before it comes out, I think Sony wants to position the PS5 Pro as now the go-to console for this generation. When you look at games like Crimson Desert and other games where other industry folk like Digital Foundry are praising the PS5 increase in graphical processing in terms of performance. You know, not in all cases, but as it stands right now, the PS5 Pro is the more capable console for this current generation. So, but it does mean that Sony has to, you know, the situation with the RAM has affected everybody. It goes beyond just Sony and Microsoft. Every company that needs RAM to do what they need to do is being affected. But unfortunately, the typical gamer, all they know is Sony and Microsoft. And I get it, but I'm just here to let you know. I'm here to let you know that this goes far beyond just gaming. So you see here key observations. Microsoft's increases are moderate, targeting $20 to $70 model, and Sony's premium console experienced substantially larger hike at $200, while standard and digital editions increased by $50. Relative to their respective base prices, Sony's high-end segment saw a steeper proportional increase than Microsoft's. So you got here the drivers of price hikes, the tariffs and import costs. Both companies face renewed U.S.-China tariffs, 25% on Chinese-made electronics that affect assembly components. Microsoft emphasizes systemic inflation and logistics costs, while Sony highlights currency fluctuations and the higher impact on premium consoles. Inflation in manufacturing, rising semiconductor and materials costs influence both price hikes. Microsoft's statements indicate a broader margin strategy rather than component-specific adjustments. Now, I typed this in. Is it likely that Microsoft may increase pricing again for Xbox? I didn't really get much of an answer here. They're kind of repeating information here, but down here, reports suggest that if another price increase occurs, the Xbox Series X could exceed $700 and the Xbox Series S might cost $450 or more. This would bring Microsoft's pricing close to high-end Sony consoles and raise concerns for budget-conscious gamers. And I believe... So, and I asked this question here. So the price increase for both Sony and Microsoft are relatively for the same reasons. And so basically, yeah, Microsoft cited factors such as tariffs, inflation, global trade fluctuations. Sony indicated broader economic pressures, including tariff, supply chain inflation, and so on. Let me see. Both companies face disruptions in logistics and component availability. Limited supply for popular consoles can lead to incremental pricing decisions to balance demand with available units. So the conclusion, the reasons underlying price increases are largely comparable between Sony and Microsoft. Both are reacting to increased component costs, supply chain challenges, and global economic factors. The differences lie mostly in the scale of the increase and timing, as each company manages corporate strategy and regional pricing independently. So yes, the price increases for Sony and Microsoft consoles are relatively similar in terms of the underlying economic and production-related reasons, even if the actual monetary adjustment differs, meaning that the main increase here is the PS5 Pro. That's the one that had the most substantial increase. Now, I did ask this particular question here. How has pricing of RAM affect? I wanted to ask this just to speak about this on the video. So just to read this, and this is sourced by 5 different sources here, as you can see. The pricing of RAM has significantly impacted the console industry, leading to potential delays in next-gen console launches. Well, I want to say right there, that part right there, you can kind of forget about that, because I made a video about this before, where there was rumor surrounding the PS6 or Sony delaying the PS6. Companies like Microsoft and Sony, when they have finally decided on their chip, like on their CPU and their GPU and things of that nature, these are things that are locked in several months in advance. This is not a situation where they just do it on a whim. So there are contracts in place. And for either Sony or Microsoft to say, you know what, we're going to now delay our console, the console manufacturer, Sony and Microsoft in this case, they are going to be faced and met with steep penalties. And so you have to pick your poison. Are you willing to accept those breach of contract penalties, or just take the hit from the RAM price increasing? So in that situation, I strongly believe that Sony are more willing to take the price and the hit of the RAM than the price of breaching the contract that they have with the with the GPU maker and the RAM provider. So let me just get back to this right quick. The surge in RAM prices are primarily due to the increased demand from AI applications, which has shifted production capacity from consumer memory to high margin HBM, high bandwidth memory for AI servers. Now, the irony of this, and I've also spoken about this, is that Microsoft is actually kind of responsible. They're one of the major players in the AI space, as many people should be aware. But not just Microsoft. You have also Google, you have Meta, you have Amazon, all of these companies, and including more, probably even IBM as well, maybe, major tech companies, which Sony does not. Sony is not in that bracket, by the way. No offense to PlayStation, but it just is. It is the fact. So Microsoft is a key player in the AI space, and they are $1 trillion company. So with them, with all of these companies looking to bolster their AI data centers and to stay ahead of the curve competitively in the AI space, it is driving up costs for RAM because it comes down to a supply and demand situation. And as a result, that situation is spiraling out of control on the console end of things. So that's what's happening. So yeah, this shift has resulted in a 171.8% year-over-year increase in DRAM prices, with consumer DDR5 kits doubling in price within months. High-end kits have also seen a 65% increase in 2 months. The current state of RAM costs is characterized by a significant price increase, with kits that were once considered budget-friendly now costing uncomfortably premium. This trend is not temporary and is the result of structural shifts in memory production and consumption. The consumption, as I said, is basic. What they're meaning by that is what I just said about the AI. That is what is driving everything right there. That's what's driving. And the fact that this increase is the number of 171.8%, that's insane. So if you hear larger channels, and I don't want to call out nobody, I really don't, but if you're listening to larger YouTube channels than me that are blaming Sony's increase on PlayStation live services are not doing well, and this is the result, they are full of shit and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So I urge for you, if you want to get the actual news and understand what is really going on in the gaming landscape, if you're new here, just subscribe to my channel, follow me over on Twitch, and get the real information. Because as you can see here, I'm doing actual real research, and I'm able to read in between the lines on what's really happening in this entire market. I wish more creators would do the same, but unfortunately they're not. So anyway, let me continue. As a result, console manufacturers are debating whether to delay next-gen platforms such as Well, that right there, they're not going to do, so you can delete that part. We can just skip past that because they could delay. Let me just be clear about that. They could delay, but they are going to face, they being Sony and Microsoft, they are going to face steep penalties if they do that. And also they run the risk of potentially missing there's a lot at stake by delaying something as significant as a console. So I highly doubt Microsoft or Sony will do that, but let's continue on. The situation is still developing and no official delay announcements or confirmed pricing changes have been made yet. The impact of these rising costs on RAM costs on the gaming industry is significant, as they could lead to higher prices for consumers. Well, which that has happened. It has led to higher pricing for consumers. So let me go to this article here. This is one of the articles that everything I was reading from was sourced from. So this is from a website called Byte. I can't pronounce his name. Anyway, you see it. I will leave this link in the pinned comment and the description of the video. So as you probably have noticed, this particular article is November 25th, 2025. It's always key to look at articles that are several months old, because it goes to illustrate that this is not a situation that just came out of left field. Because right now we are in March 27th of 2026. So this being an article from November 25th just goes to highlight that this is not a situation for those who might be ignorant to what's going on. This is not something that just came out the blue. So as you see here, DDR5 RAM prices surge 171%. PS5 now costs less. Now this is back then. This is not, anyway, you understand what I'm trying to say. So yeah, the numbers tell a brutal story. DRAM contract prices jumped 171.8% year over year as Q3 2025, surpassing gold's appreciation rate during the same period. Think about that. So RAM prices surpassed gold prices. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to leave a link to this article. I highly suggest you take a look at this article because everything that's going on now, right in today's moment, stems back from what happened in the past. That's how these things usually go. What happens in the past affects our future and even our present. So AI memory demand cannibalizes consumer design. I've just said that now, didn't I? The root cause is straightforward but devastating. High bandwidth memory and conventional consumer DDR5 share the same manufacturing fabs and wafer capacity. But high bandwidth memory consumes more than 3 times the wafer resource per unit. Memory manufacturers have reallocated production accordingly, chasing multi-billion-dollar AI server contracts with NVIDIA, OpenAI, and cloud providers. Cloud providers such as Amazon and Microsoft. So, like I said, I'm going to leave this article. I highly suggest you guys go through this because then you'll have a better understanding of what's really going on. But I didn't want this video to drag on too long, but I just want people to understand that there is more at play in the gaming industry, not only when it comes to video games, but also consoles. You have to understand that as pricing for one thing goes up, the manufacturer that needs that particular component, they're going to be forced to raise their prices. And at the end of the day, we are the ones that's left holding the bag. So while you're probably going to hear, well, this is what Sony does to thank us for, I've heard this before on Twitter, which is like fucking Reddit 2.0, because there's a lot of smooth brain, low IQ people on there, unfortunately. And I don't blame the typical consumer. I blame a lot of the content creators. I blame a lot of the social media influencers that somehow have 40,000 plus followers, and they're not giving the full story. It's like the blind leading the blind. So that's why I'm trying to give you the best insight and news that I possibly can based on my own experience of being in this industry for over 20 years. So when you have something that you need to build your product that's going to cost you $20, and I've said this at the beginning of the video, if now all of a sudden that same product, that component that you need is now costing you upwards of $50 to maybe even $100, are you going to be able to sell that product for the same price and remain competitive? No, you are not. You're not. That's like if you have a bakery business and you're baking bread, right? If now the cost of flour is going up like damn near 50%, can you still maintain your business by selling your bread for the same price? No. I mean, you could, but it's going to really negatively impact your business. Now, even though Sony is the console market lead, even though they do have the highest installed base when compared to Microsoft, because I believe their installed base for PlayStation 5 is around 85 million across globally, whereas Microsoft is about 34 point something or 35 million. Sony is not exempt to this. Sony is still looking to make a profit on their products. Now, another thing that that Sony has done, which is something that Microsoft did as well, is instead of placing the brunt of the actual cost on their services to offset the price increase of the macroeconomic environment that we are in currently, they're deciding to put the price increase on, or the cost on, consoles. This is exactly what they did with Microsoft, what Microsoft did with Xbox. And people raised hell about this because this is how I look at it. And I don't know if you are going to look at it in the same way. We are very deep in the console market. We're deep into this generation, which is the 9th generation. Very deep. If you don't already have an Xbox Series X, if you don't already have a PS5, then it's kind of like from their perspective, there being Sony and Microsoft, it's like people should already have a console by now. They should. Now, there are still people that are buying consoles. Maybe, for instance, I'm thinking of a few situations. Maybe your console broke. It can't be repaired. You can't get a replacement. You have to buy a new console. Maybe you're an Xbox person and you finally decided, hey, you know what? I want to go and buy a PlayStation. You go and do that. Or vice versa. Maybe you're a Sony person and you decide to buy an Xbox. Those are situations that I can see somebody actually going out and buying a console today, even at their increased pricing, because those consoles are still sold. People are still buying Xboxes, maybe not as much, and people are still buying PlayStation 5s and even the PS5 Pro. People are still buying. People got money. Some people are just more well off. However, I think what Sony and Microsoft decided to do is, instead of placing the price, the cost of what's been going on in the macroeconomic environment, instead of putting that on their services, which is what is really giving them money, because I can tell you this right now, and I've said this countless times, consoles are not what the companies make their money off of. Console sales is not really what console makers make the majority of their money on. Sure, you know, it's been known that the PS5 has sold a boatload of consoles and they have reaped significant profit. Yes. However, when looking at it as a unit, for each console sold, that's what I'm talking about. Sony and Microsoft take a financial hit. Now, that hit is a bit offset when you're able to sell multiple millions of consoles. However, at the end of the day, even though Sony has profited greatly by the selling of a PS5, which is about 80 million in terms of installed base, the amount of money they could have made is very, very significant if they had a wider profit margin, a profit spread. So if you still don't understand what I'm saying, I'm gonna just put it to you in a simpler way. Every time Sony sells a PlayStation 5, Sony does get a bit of a profit, but just know that Sony is not getting the lion's share of that $600 console or $700 console that they sold. Sure, they might be getting about maybe a little bit over $100, maybe even $200. But that's my point, is that for each console sold, they are essentially selling it at a financial hit. Where these consoles or where these companies are making the majority of their money, they're making it off of the they're making off of the software, like games, DLC, components like controllers, things of that nature, live services. That's where the majority of the money is coming from. That's why these consoles are not putting the brunt or the maximum impact on the services, and they're just rather putting it on the consoles, because they're rather like, hey, if I'm Sony, if we already have 80 something million consoles out in the wild, we can take this hit and put it on the console side, and whoever's going to buy the console is going to buy it, while at the same time we're still making money month over month over month due to our services. Now, if we were to put the brunt of that cost onto the services themselves, that would greatly affect our bottom line financially. So they're choosing the lesser of two evils. So while Sony raised the price of a PlayStation, Microsoft raised the price of an Xbox, which to my understanding has never happened in a console space. But you have to understand also that in this generation or any other generation, we have not seen the rising of RAM costs quite like this ever. This is brand new territory. So this is why we're seeing the increasing of the pricing of consoles this late into a generation, where in the past we would be seeing console prices drop. However, we are not in a usual generation, because right now AI is the big thing right now, and unfortunately it is tapping into that RAM manufacturing source, because they're sourcing RAM from the same source, from the same pool. So that's what's been going on. And anyway, I didn't want to go on too long. I'm approaching 30 minutes. Subscribe if you're new. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. But this is basically what's going on. It has everything to do with the rising of RAM pricing. And unfortunately, if it affects Microsoft, which is about a $3 trillion company, it's gonna damn sure affect Sony, which is only about 128 billion by comparison. Anyway, this is Red with Red Related. I'm out. Look for that article in the description. You might have to scroll further down, but I will also leave it in the pinned comment. So I want to also give you the information for you to read on your own, so you have a better understanding of what's going on. In the event that my explanation didn't help, you can read the article and you probably will get what you need from that. Anyway, take care. Peace. Salute.